Welcome to the first class. I actually titled it in my work today. Me and Russell Kirk gave it a nice title. Kind of like being Job. The Job moment. Being Job. And this is kind of how the class is going to go. It's not going to be my regular work, which is a little bit more prepared. It's going to be a lot of little notes with my own little dictations on them. A lot of gaps and weird moments. And completely exposed and revealed. So the point of the class, and I hope the people will get accustomed to using the microphone and sharing on the microphone. The class is about keeping it real and getting real and being real and ultimately getting through the transition phase that we're all in. So it's not going to be my traditional, wisdom and Mishlei and how great the verses of the Torah are. This is a little different. This is coming clean. This is coming unglued. It's really what it's about, I think, for everybody involved. And I just had a little session with Gear Shampoo on Skype before this. And I think literally as my traditional style, I never get the full revelation of what I'm doing until about 30 seconds before I ever do anything. For anybody that followed the Shem series from years ago, that was really called the Rabbi Katz and Ross Bearden 2 seconds before broadcast series. And that was me and Ross just hitting the Skype until the last second. And, people saying, Rabbi Katz, you're late to class. Where are you? He's like, oh, yeah, we're coming. It's me and Ross putting the final parts to it. So here we go. There's no proper way to begin this. There's no proper way to end this. And there's going to be a lot of random threads as I open things up. So if whatever part speaks to you, let it speak to you. And if it doesn't speak to you, it probably will at some point. And there's a lot of ways I would like to open up with the series. I mean, there's so many things I'd like to say first. Why Job and why the wrestler and what are we doing? So I think it's the same thing as Rabbi Katz, tell me Ger on 1 foot. That's a non-question, and that's why people are upset, is because they want Ger on 1 foot. It just doesn't exist. That's why religious dating is very hard, because you're looking to get potentially married. And at the end of the day, you just have to sit down. If you're interested in the date, in Orthodox circles, you have to do an interview. It's like, hey, you're telling me where you're from, what do you do? That's nice. And do you like scrambled eggs? What do you like to do? What do you like to eat? I mean, you're trying to say, hey, are we going to get along, get married? But it doesn't work that way. You can't just come out and come out that way. So it comes out in an awkward way, like an interview. And that's when usually the date dies. It wasn't the one. Because it's kind of like, whoever can dance right off the bat, that's the one you're going to marry. Right? But as long as the interview starts off on the wrong foot, then it's going to be a little awkward. And that's when it's like, you're a nice guy, you're a nice girl, but not for me. Next, please, on the list. So, again, there's so many aspects I want to address first. But again, the main issue with what the class is it's like Seinfeld. Seinfeld was a show about nothing. This is a series about nothing. This is a series just dealing with the realities of life and revolving around Ger, Torah, God, in the church, out of the church, back to the church, out of the Jewish church, in the Jewish church. What is a Jewish church? What does Ger mean, and why do I feel this way? And it's the aspect of Ger when you're sitting in front of your computer and you type, really dominant, like, oh, I know all about Ger, Rabbi Katz. But in your inside, in your soul, you're saying, I don't even know what he's talking about. And my dog died yesterday, and I'm late for dinner, and I'm nervous about things, and I don't know what's going on. This Katz guy is a little too aggressive. Right? That process, that normal life process that nobody really talks about, and it's not appropriate to talk about. You're not going to type about your dinner plans when I'm typing away about the Ger Toshav and the time is there with Rambam, right? These little discussions that go unannounced and how you say this, undelved in, and has been improper English. But they exist nonetheless, and those people are nervous and about life and anxieties, and I'm nervous with life's anxieties. And ultimately, these life anxieties are what polarizes us and keeps us apart and allows for the miscommunications to persist. And then you go into a Facebook forum where, frankly, I'm not interested in dealing with you today mentality, and it goes corrupt. Right, it becomes lost in translation and sidetracked, and the Satan enters it. Yeah, and Judaism does have the Satan. It's the corrupt file, and this is really what at the end of the day, what the Vilna Gaon is saying is the key between you and redemption, you and Mashiach, between you and God. Right, this is the replacement Jesus theology. And I'm only picking Jesus because he's the most recent idolatry in that light, right? King David spoke about the same impediment in Psalms and its composition well before there ever was a Jesus. It's just King David called it the idols, right? So that middle ground between you and God, whatever false religion you want to plug in there will work. I'm going to call it Jesus only because that's the most recent incarnation of the program and virus itself. But it really doesn't matter. You can call it whatever you want. And, it's not to offend with the whole Jesus thing. It's just kind of like that's the vernacular of where we're at. So with that said, that's the class. And, I'm going to do a lot of sharing in this class and all the classes. I do encourage people to share their stories. And here we go. And I do almost to the point of mandate drama being in this class. This is where drama is okay. This is where the Facebook drama should be, right? I want to dramatize this. I want to expose this. I want to be as human as possible in here and share with you my process and allow people to share their process and realize that we're not the devils that we claim to be in everybody else's eyes. So, and I think that dramatizing the speech will show an insight to where I'm coming from and allow other people to show and express where they're coming from, and that your insanities are actually normal and not insane at all. It really is the human process. And to me, it's my salvation. It is why I'm able to do what I do just in my own life. Everyone's able to do it. Everyone does it. I'm just speaking from my own point of view. My job as a rabbi, I guess, is to highlight the process, right? It's like you may be a natural feng shui in your house, but you might need a feng shui master to say, hey, that's great that you put your couch in that position. That's where I put my couch too, and I'm a feng shui master. You probably feel great about that, right? Yeah, I feel real good about that. So here we go. You see an image on your whiteboard. Everybody give me a 1 or 2 on that. You should see an image of a big guy, right, walking off the wrestling mat with his shoes. That was actually me in my gold medal match at the Olympics. You guys know that? That was actually me. I left my shoes on the mat. It was a hard day for me. Just that I'm joking about. I actually didn't make it to the Olympics. That wasn't me. This is Rulon Gardner. And Rulon Gardner is kind of like a personal hero. He beat a guy in the Olympics it was David and Goliath. I remember reading the article at the coffee house. This guy beat like 13-time world champion Russian monster. The Russian guy, like, literally was the strongest guy that ever lived. I mean, you can Google him, Alexander Karyelin. And this guy beat him, a hillbilly from Nebraska that knows nothing from nothing. I mean, he went up there and just knocked out Goliath. And then the follow-up Olympics in 2004, he took bronze. And the custom in wrestling is you leave your shoes on the mat when you're done. When you realize you gave all you have and there's just nothing else to give, I mean, he's just done. And that's what he's doing, right? He took his bronze medal. He's got the American flag, and his shoes are on the mat, and he's moved on. And I think that's really, the big metaphor of where where we should all realize we're coming from. So the metaphor speaks louder than words. I think you can agree with that, right? 1 or 2. Type in 1 or 2. If you can understand, you don't have to understand wrestling itself. It's just kind of like you can see that guy's in process, and he's showing us his process. And that metaphor of leaving the shoes on the mat, I don't know where it came from, and it doesn't really matter. You really don't have to ask those questions to get what I'm saying. That's the beauty of what I'm saying. And I'm going to intertwine my personal rabbinical stuff in this, that the Ger teaching also, you don't have to know what I'm saying. If I say he left his shoes on the mat with a picture, you're like, yeah, I get that. But what do you mean about the wrestling? Don't ask that question. It is okay for you to rely on your own process. Like, yeah, I get it. He left his shoes on the mat, period. The guy's crying. He's got his American flag. He's transitioning to a normal life outside of the Olympic tortures, being cattle prodded, to whatever that means, right? You can get it. You can allow yourself to just get that. And we can discuss it. And there's no such thing as I know more than you as I wrestled, and then therefore you're going to look stupid if you don't get the wrestling metaphor. It doesn't work that way. And this is everything we're going to get into with Ger, Noahide, Torah, Hashem, Judaism, stinky socks. Right? It just doesn't matter. You have what to say. You have a soul. God is with you. There's really nothing blocking the flow. And this is what, if I could get people to get this with Ger, I would retire tomorrow. There's nothing stopping you from getting it. When I started with teaching with Ross Bearden and day 1, I didn't know what Ger was. I found it in the 10 Commandments and a couple commentaries and, hey, can we keep Shabbos? Yeah, Ross, I think you can. Have a nice day. I'm still trying to get my, walk off my personal wrestling mat. In the end, it became 5 years of research and mastery of the language of Ger. But Ross Bearden, to take him and put the emphasis on the guy, because he's the one who started it with me, the research, I didn't really care if he understood what the word Gimel Reish Ger meant. And he didn't care either. And we met up in time and space where it's like, let's just talk about it and see where it goes. I don't really care if you're a non-Jew, and I don't really care if you're a rabbi. And that's kind of, what Rulon Gardner here had to have that attitude on the wrestling. I don't care if you're a 13-time world champion that can break my neck. I'm just kind of here to wrestle, man. And he did, and he won. And in the end, he still left his wrestling shoe. So it doesn't stop. The only tragedy, this is as cliche as it ever is going to get. What would have happened if Rulon Gardner wouldn't have ever stepped on the mat out of the intimidation? And you knew I had to say that because that's cliche. But and then you say, well, he did step on the mat, and that's also cliche. It's very cliche. But what's not cliche is the life metaphor before the mat, after the mat, and on the mat. So here we go. I'm now going to incriminate mankind. I'm going to complain and point my fingers and do my blame and introduce you to the guy that Nick Talley was friends with. When I went to Texas, Loretta, I don't know if you met Nick or not. I don't think you did. Nick was the Ger that showed up on Friday night. Did you meet Nick? Oh. Well, you were there on... No. Nick was there on Friday. Were you there Friday? Yeah. So Nick showed up, and I was teaching at Anita Jones's house. I didn't know where Nick was going to show up, if he was going to show up. He's a high school friend. Who came on Saturday? If you don't mind me asking, I forget who that was. Wait, did he come on Saturday? I thought it was Friday night. No, wait, I'm confused. I thought it was Friday night. Okay, yes, you know best. I'm confused. Texas was just kind of blur. I didn't know if Nick was going to come to Abilene or Lubbock. Yeah, I called him before the trip and said, hey, I know you're living in Texas and Dallas, and I'm going to be here. And he was all excited about Gare. He was one of my best friends when I was 15 in Centerville, Ohio. Yeah, that's him. Okay, I guess it was Saturday. Just trying to put the dots. Oh, yeah, I guess that's right. Because, that's right. That's right. Because I taught in Vendel's chair Friday night, and then it was like I crashed out to go to bed, and then Saturday the whole thing happened. You're right. Absolutely. 100%. So I'm so glad Nick was able to come to the Anita Jones affair, because that's where everybody really, I think, had the bonding at the highest level of joy. And Nick doesn't owe me any favors, I mean, I always say, if you want to prove Gare, don't even listen to what I'm telling you. Just understand that some guy that knew David Katz at 15 years old in Centerville, Ohio, showed up to like the Gare convention at Anita Jones's house because he just simply was a Gare and recognized Gare. I mean, Loretta, you saw it. I mean, I had nothing to do with that. Nachon, 1 or 2. I had nothing to do with this guy. I mean, the work was done when I was 15 years old. Blame me at 15. The damage was done to his soul at 15, if you want to blame me. The fact is, he didn't look too damaged. He brought his girlfriend, fiance, who she found out she was a Gare that night, only because Loretta will tell you the bonding at that night, man, I had nothing to do with that night. Zero. But just they adored each other. They adored you, Loretta. It just had nothing to do with me. The damage was done as kids in Dayton, Ohio. So I go back to Dayton, Ohio a lot in my mind, if not daily. That's right. And I started to do wrestling meditations. I got interested in the sport, as a wounded veteran of the sport. Once I hit my early 30s, late 20s, I started to accept the fact that I'm not the greatest wrestler of all time. And, my curiosity's peaked, and football and basketball and baseball don't appeal to me like they did as a kid, because I never had a personal interest of being a professional anything. Football, 5'7", and all of my wrestler stocky build. It was never a dream of mine. But wrestling was a dream. It was a big dream. It was my only dream. So I appreciated the sport, but I sucked at wrestling. I didn't have the wisdom, and I didn't know that wisdom even existed. And growing up in Centerville, Ohio, we were told there is no such thing as wisdom, and I believed it. But me and Nick often would ponder, maybe there is wisdom out there, and maybe there is something special. And we were immature kids, and we dreamt, and life moved us on. And in Texas, we met up, and Nick realized that his friend Dave found wisdom, and I realized that my friend Nick found wisdom. And that's really all that Texas was for the Nick David pipeline, was that two guys that had dreams as kids reunited at 37 years old, and we both found wisdom in the world. So if anybody wants to know what is Gare, Gare is Nick Talley finding his old buddy and vice versa, and they appreciated the wisdom that they each one found, letting each other know that the dream of when they were 15 didn't die. Unfortunately, on Facebook, it comes out as the Rambam and Ger Toshav, and whether we not all these things, but that's really not Gare. And all these things of I get Gare, you get Gare. Gare is Nick Talley coming to Anita Jones's house, and with his fiance, and when he left, saying, "David, I just want to thank you for inviting me. I'm ready to marry my fiance." That's Gare. That's how I see it. And you're going to see it differently, and you're entitled to see it differently. But what it is not the Rambam. It is not Rabbi David Katz's take on the Rambam. It is not people's attacks that I'm the new pope and with my teachings and dogmas of the Gare. That is just how you convey kind of binary code data in a Facebook vulgar forum of trying to get people sparked on their search when emotions and feelings don't have a playground to play on in the Facebook arena. So what I can also tell you is that Loretta did not meet any Rambam fanatic at Anita Jones's house when the Ger kind of message illuminated, despite the fact that I lectured for 14 hours consecutive on that Shabbos about the Rambam. And that's not a contradiction. Right? Well, do you want to give a 1 or 2 on that one? I mean, it was 14 hours straight of dictation of the Rambam, which ironically had nothing to do with the Rambam. I mean, Nick doesn't even know who the Rambam is. It's just, you had to be there. It had nothing. It's just, I mean, on Shabbos at my house, this is what I do. I just go into meditation for like 14 hours of Torah, and whoever's around me gets to hear whatever it is I'm doing just because that's just who I am. I mean, my mother is experiencing it now in my house with making Aliyah. I mean, wherever I'm at in text, that's what's going to come out. And that's why I speak about the Ger stuff on Facebook. My job is, as a rabbi, is to be Talmudic and just share what I'm learning today. And I'm only learning today whatever it is you guys send me with your questions because, frankly, I find it interesting. Right? You might find Moby Dick interesting. I find your questions about the Rambam's perplexed nature of 3 types of Ger Toshav interesting. Call me crazy. And then, I have to basically type it and send it to somebody because I have an insatiable desire to reiterate Torah. Okay. But at the same time, that didn't dominate what Anita Jones's house was. And again, to understand how that's not a contradiction, it's kind of you have to just be there. And there's plenty of people that were there to tell you how that was. So, to get back to the point, at 15, that was Nick and that was me, and we were in math class talking about wisdoms, and my defunct wrestling career due to a broken arm, junior year of high school. My dreams were eliminated. And again, as a 20-something or 30-something-year-old, I really appreciate the sport. I understand Rulon Gardner, our guy in our picture, a little clearer. And I like watching the videos to find out, like, the inside scoop of what I wasn't getting right. It's kind of like tshuva. It's a pathetic tshuva. I am a pathetic person just like everybody else, right? But we all do this tshuva, I remember as a kid getting baseball cards, and at 6 years old, and there was, the Reds. I was a big Reds fan in Cincinnati. And there was a team called the Giants. I didn't know it was called the Giants. How to read. And when you find out it's with a J, it's the Giants. You remember back, remember when I used to call it the Giants. So now it's like whenever I see the word Giants, in the back of my mind, I give a slight chuckle, thinking back or a throwback to 6-year-old Dave when I called it the Giants. That's how the mind works. You're going to remember those little tshuvas, repentances that you do. That's called growing, and that's how the mind grows and you mature. So I like to do tshuva. I like to watch wrestling videos of the guys that are doing great today, and I write notes. I call it in my notes, Sod Avak, the secret of wrestling, in my little shorthand, jibber-jabber notes. Write down in Hebrew, Sod Avak. And then I give the little secret of the day. And I take notes because there's a lot of wisdom that comes from wrestling. It's like life wisdom, like, always go hard and never quit. I'm like, yes, that's it. That's really it. The secret of everything is going hard and never quitting. You're right. You're right, David Taylor. You're right. And then I'll go on Facebook with a meme. It's all about going hard and never quitting. Go team, go. Then the Ger pop up like, yeah, Rabbi Katz are behind you. It's all about not quitting. Go Ger. And I take it seriously, right? I'm like, yeah, it is Ger wisdom. Go team, go. And again, it comes from my pursuit of being the best wrestler ever. Even at 37, I'm not going to lie, I have dreams and ambitions of getting back on the mat. And I think in a daydream when I'm driving my kids to school, maybe I could get in shape for one more tournament before I'm 40, right? Just get on the treadmill and then, get on with a senior tour and just get one more time. I actually believe that Nourishkite. You know what? I actually believe that. Until it's over, it ain't over. Then you hear about the stories about, the return guy who was a national champion, and at 35, he did it. His name was Mark Bader. And so I am this crazy. I am this pathetic, and I am this crazy. And there's a guy in SWAT in the classifieds. His name is Gershom. He makes an advertisement about a year and a half ago. I'm a national champion wrestler in America looking for a workout partner. I'm like, dude, this is my guy. My dream is alive. And I called him up, like, hey, Gershon, my name is David Katz, and hey, I wrestled for Centerville before my arm broke. And, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm pretty good, I'm a little bit out of shape. That's not, So those that see me know what that drum is like. And he said, hey, David, you want to work out? I said, yeah. Now, this guy is 75 years old. He's one of those guys that never quits, he's not going to die. Gershon will live forever. And lo and behold, I went on the internet, bought a new pair of wrestling shoes and knee pads, and we found a Gymboree in SWAT, right? Where, the Gymboree with the mat, and we scheduled a time to go work out on the Gymboree mat. And we got the air conditioner going, and I'm beating the crap out of old Gershom. Realistically, he's like, well, David, you almost made me sweat today. Almost. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get you, Gershom. But he's a dear friend of mine. And lo and behold, I'm back on the mat at 37 years old. And I'm watching Flow Wrestling. And I'm like, hey, Gershom, we got to try to do a drag and a slide by. And I saw Logan Stieber do it on his 4th NCAA title. I mean, do you realize how pathetic this is? But at the same time I'm doing it, I'm actually putting that wisdom to action. Because you do take life that serious. Don't let yourself convince yourself that you don't care about your little dreams and fantasies. And if you can even just connect with Gershom, a 75-year-old on a mat, and the Gymboree in SWAT, I'll tell you what, man, it's worth it. People want to say like, oh, he went to Texas with a bunch of goyim to teach about the Noahide. Man, if one nasty person said that in the email from a friend. I'm saying if you even knew what Texas was and the trip was and what Garrett is and who Loretta is and who Nick is and Anita Jones's house was and the joy on those faces from the pictures y'all saw on Facebook, and you're going to mock that, I feel sorry for you. Because that's called the cover of Torah. That's where the glory of Torah is. And then kind of to embellish that point, that's what Ger is. Now, is that the entirety of Ger? No, but man, that's certainly on the path. So I'm still watching the videos on Flow Wrestling, and you see, I'm taking notes, and I mean it. I'm actually trying to beat up this 75-year-old guy. And in reality, he's in better shape than I am, and he hurts me. He is painful. That guy put a whooping on me. And, I mean, it's all in good spirit, but it's life. It's allowing life. He's harassing me now, like, when are we going to get our partnership back? This guy wants to beat my butt. And I'm like, thank God for people like Gershom and Flow Wrestling and Rulon Gardner and my pathetic dreams of wrestling. Because I can lie and deny all I want that I wish I was on that mat still, but it's not going away. Because my dreams were true. I was 16 once upon a time. And I was very strong and very fast and a very powerful mind, only to put the use of, I want to be an Olympian like Rulon Gardner. Now, I might not be shooting for the Olympics nowadays, and I'm settling for Gershom. But the wisdom is real, and I do want to do tshuva. I want to know what made a great wrestler. Why didn't I get it at 16? Why did I suck? Why did I make bad decisions? Why did I get in a position I broke my arm, no more scholarship to college? life sucked after that. Got in a lot of trouble, not in terms of the law, just life decisions. I certainly wasn't any kind of religion, Judaism or truth and wisdom, just kind of meandering. And most people would call that a normal late teenage experience where you send their kids to Israel to goof around in yeshiva for a couple of years, and then you get your act together. But I didn't come from a religious home, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and I felt guilty that I wasn't a successful career person at 17 or 18 like Big Brother Ben on Wall Street, who was 13 years older than me. No one pulled me aside and said, hey, Dave, you're 17. You're not going to compete with Big Brother Ben, who's 30 and has been doing this when you're 17. But I didn't have Papa Bear wisdom coming into my world. And I pointed a lot of fingers because of that. And, you know, you're pointing a lot of fingers too, and you have to, because it's real. You can't not do it. As they say in Texas, you can't not do it. So as the bitterness dwelled in me for a long time. Big Brother Ben moved on without me. Wrestling dreams went down the wayside. Didn't get the full ride to the scholarship. Then by the time you get interested in religion, I wasted my years. I didn't do tshuva. Wrestling sucks. Probably just fixed anyways. You know, it's a ripped off sport because I got ripped off. So wrestling probably is a rip off sport. You know, they probably cheat and make stuff up. And see, now I'm doing my replacement theology. Feeling sorry for myself. You know, and wrestling's not as great as I thought. And then you go through your Jewish phase. Oh, it's a goyim sport anyways. You know, I'm Jewish. And I wouldn't even be able to wrestle on Shabbos anyways because I keep Shabbos and I'm a Jew and I'm above this. And what is it meant to be? I'm above it. You know, in my little delusions of grandeur, I'm above it. And again, we all have this process. Whatever it is you're fighting, you know, whether it was an abusive partner, abusive relative, you know, you were picked on in school, you were fat, you were short, you were ugly. I'm so beautiful, no one understands me. Everybody has their thing. For me, it was you robbed me of my wrestling dream. You robbed me of my glory in my childhood. You robbed me of popularity in high school. You robbed me of my friends. You robbed me of my dignity. You robbed me of everything. I just wanted to feel going into a gymnasium filled with people, and one day they're going to say, that's Dave Katz. He's a 119-pound wrestler from Dayton. This kid is really good. We think he may be the greatest of all time. And I would have done anything to have experienced that. That's what I want to let myself believe. But I'm a liar because I wouldn't have done anything for that. Eric Bryan will tell you from our personal collaborative research. On Flow Wrestling tonight, there's part 2 actually. It came out. Eric, you'll be hearing from me about that. There's a guy by the name of Kerry Colott, billed as the greatest high school wrestler of all time. And I'm like, yeah, you know, we all want to be Kerry Colott, and the best of all time. Well, Kerry Colott, his soul's mission was to have that mission. For me, working hard was like one extra sprint, and I'm thinking like, I'm entitled to be the best ever. You guys practically owe me. We all know how the ego is at 16 years old. Which is also a lie, because if I was that egotistical, there wouldn't have been a Nick Talley. So you see the double-chambered mirrors and smoke and all this stuff that the ego and mind play on you. You think you are so egotistical, then how come you were talking gear with Nick Talley, who was a punk rocker skateboarder? So King Solomon says, this too is hevel and futilities. But I'm not dwelling on the Nick thing. I'm not beating myself up in the middle of the night saying, why wasn't I a better friend than Nick? That wasn't my issue. And apparently I got through to Nick enough that he showed up 20 years later giving me a high five about being Gare. So that's not my fight. That's why I'm not fighting Gare. It's not my fight. I'm just super duper interested in it. And apparently it worked when I was 15, and it's all the more so is something that I chose to do with my life because it's not an ego thing. My ego thing is still trying to figure out how to beat up Gershon, right? To be the greatest wrestler of all time. I'm not letting that go because my ego won't let me. But I'm working on it. It's just my ego, right? My identity in high school was to be that wrestler. You know, that was where my shattered spirit got shattered. I broke my arm junior year and the dream was over. And it's like, what happened? You know, all my free will choices were from the age of like 10 to 17, like the most formative years of our ego building experiences were around this fairy tale that I concocted in my head. I'm going to get a scholarship and all these things. So the point is that as I got older and started doing the reflections of life, and for those that don't know the personal sagas, I got married at like 29. We had 2 kids, and my wife died in 2012. It was not an easy marriage, and she committed suicide. So there's a lot of personal issues going on. You know, in the middle of the Shem series that you may have heard on YouTube or whatever, you know, that by the 5th or 6th class, whatever it was when I became a single parent taking care of 2 babies at home alone, and you know, this whole thing, and you know, didn't miss a beat because life demanded that I didn't miss a beat. You know, I had to raise the kids. The Ger movement was starting. People were excited. And I'm not prepared to let them down because life, you know, like Rocky, you know what that thing with Rocky is, you know, you get beat down, you get back up, whatever that is. I'm not going to step down just because life wants to throw a good jab. Not my style. So, you know, back in the day with Nick Talley, I didn't let him down either. And that's just who I am as a person. You know, I remember being in my kitchen with Nick, and like, you know, another friend, a former wrestler, was there, and it was like a jock thing, like, oh, we're cool. And Nick came over, and the guy was like, you know, why are you hanging out with this punk rocker idiot for? And I drew my line in the sand that day. I told the wrestler friend to get out of my kitchen. That Nick's my friend. If he doesn't like it, he's got to leave. Because of that choice that many years ago, look what it produced. Produced a Nick Talley. You know, and everybody has these things in their life. You all have made decisions and drawn your line in the sand, and you've impacted somebody's life. But you don't care because you're chasing a fantasy about the glory of the wrestling mat and leaving your shoes there. And you're allowed to fantasize about that. It's called the ego. So the point is that through the hardships of life and learning how to grieve and learning how to move on and taking the punches of life, living in Israel, making Aliyah and going through yeshiva and trying to get by in yeshiva and learn Torah and learn Hebrew and learn all these things and be this rabbi thing and reinvent your life and be a Baal Tshuva, and now you're in Sfat, and it's like so many things went so fast out of those high school years. Eventually it catches up and you start to do the meditations of, just now that you slow down and catch your breath. Okay, I'm a rabbi now and I got smicha, got 2 kids. And you start to reconnect to your youth. You start to get Facebook becomes invented and you start fantasizing and dreaming at night. Hey, whatever happened to Bill and Bob? How do I find Bill and Bob? My old friends from school. And next thing you know, it's on Facebook. Hey, man, where you at? Hey, I'm in Sfat, became religious, and now I'm a rabbi, and I'm teaching all these non-Jews Torah like you back in the day. Remember that? And so the fantasies start to become true in this generation. You start to find those friends, and maybe I wouldn't have thought about wrestling, but now it's like your friends list. It's like there's guys that you actually wrestled with in high school posting pictures on Facebook of you when you wrestled back in the day. So yeah, the ego is alive and well in 2015. And I'm fully embracing it. I'm saying I think it's good to fully embrace the myth of me, myth of you. And so when my mom started to visit Israel, and I got the kids and starting to put the pieces together, I started to really allow myself to meditate and go back into the past. I pointed the fingers a long time. My coach, created the problem, and he didn't let me become great, and it was always his fault. And I mean, it wasn't like an active crusade against the guy. I just didn't have any respect for him, didn't like him, and I think it was his fault. So I thought. But when you start to put the picture together and research the internet, and you start to really think, who was that 16-year-old kid that had a dream of wrestling, and what was the reality? To make a long story short, where I'm at now, after having really dissected my past and understanding why the decisions were made and what was reality. The reality was the guy was an old man, the coach. He was like 65. And I moved into Centerville in the middle of the year. And I just now saw, like 2 weeks ago, somebody posted the team pictures from back then. And he was wearing wrestling shoes, the coach. Which it was not odd. Every coach wears wrestling shoes. But something happened because when I got to campus, I made varsity as a freshman, so I had potential. It's not like I'm totally insane. He never wore wrestling shoes when I got there. It was always tennis shoes. And I'm like, why doesn't coach wear wrestling shoes? But I was 15, 16 years old. It's not the kind of thing you ask the guys and the teams. That's already a wisdom question. And so a 15-year-old doesn't think to ask wisdom questions. Otherwise, that's why we're doing this meditation. But look at the metaphor the coach was giving me. He left the shoes on the mat. He was done. And he retired after the next year and left us stranded. So I moved into a complicated situation. I moved into a situation where the new kid in town, we moved out of the old neighborhood. The coach left the shoes on the mat. I'm a Jewish kid in a Jewish household where, we don't do the things necessary that as a heritage that a great wrestler would do. That Kerry Kolat kid, his dad shocked him with a cattle prod in order to control him and freak him out so he wouldn't get beat in the wrestling room. Well, I may have had an interesting childhood and growing up with my own craziness in the house as everybody else did, but I certainly wasn't shocked with a cattle prod. Okay? So the tools necessary to be a great wrestler, as odd and just medieval as you can get, that was not my childhood. My medieval insanities were, being Jewish and my mother keeping gefilte fish in the refrigerator door of the house, so that when my friends would come and look for food at my house, they saw the gefilte fish and they'd say, "What's that?" I'd say, "Oh, it's my gefilte fish." And they'd say, "What is that?" I'd say, "Oh, it's Jewish food." So it's like, my heritage was to be as Jewish as possible in a covert way that I didn't even know was happening. So where Kerry Kolat was being shocked, I was being Judaized right before my eyes and didn't know it. The boosters in the high schools, they call looking for money. Hey, we're going to put together a good team this year. If you can give about $500, we're going to get the team go to a tournament over in Idaho. And well, my mother, her attitude was like, we're Jewish. We don't do that. David has Hebrew school. Thank you for asking. Imagine how the coach is going to feel, right? Well, this kid, he's strong. He's fast. He's a good kid. He's coming from, right? Hey, you're going to give $500, right? We're going to take him to the tournament, right? And all the mothers like, yeah, he's Jewish. Go away. We're Jews. Okay. I mean, my mother's coming from a time of like post-World War II and the Holocaust, where Jewish survival and Zionism and the creation of the state of Israel and was the key. Where kids went to a wrestling summer camp, I went to Young Judea Jewish summer camp. Anybody that knows what Jewish summer camp is, that's where you learn the wisdoms of life at a young age. And I thought it was stupid. I thought it was extremely stupid. But then you find out, how did I get to Israel in my early 20s? Because that Zionist dream, they planted a seed in that young kid's mind. Before I ever touched a wrestling mat, when I was 9 years old, I went to summer camp. And they always said, when the you-know-what hits the fan, you need to get to Israel. And I'm like, yeah. Go eat your kosher cheese. I'm going to be a wrestler one day. And boy, when the you-know-what hit the fan, I'll tell you where I got my tuchus over to. I got to Israel. I wasn't looking for Rulon Gardner in the wrestling mat. That much I can tell you. And not to say that anything was so horrible in my life. But, in 18, 19, without wisdom, life is pretty scary. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I thought I wanted to be a wrestler, but man, that ended in a hurry. I better get to Israel and be safe and secure because I don't know what's going to happen. Ended up being the greatest move of my life. But that's the thing. I was programmed and trained for that transition. I never saw it coming until about 2 years ago, that really was what the reality was. You're a Jewish kid in Dayton, Ohio, with a Jewish single mother putting gefilte fish in the refrigerator door. You go to a Zionist Jewish summer camp every summer looking for a Jewish girlfriend, and you're going to end up in Israel and become a rabbi teaching ger like Nick. There never was a wrestler. He didn't exist. Okay? It
Rabbi,
didn't exist. Yeah.
Aksha.
Yeah. What's that? Come again? So say it again. What are you saying?
Rabbi, I said, Bevakasha.
Okay.
Yalla.
So, the circumstances of my youth were false, as I saw it. I thought I actually had a chance to be a wrestler and be successful and get that scholarship. But God and Mazel had another plan in mind. Right? My mother wasn't going to get me cattle prodded. I wasn't going to go to wrestling summer camp. I wasn't going to be carted around to tournaments across the country. When you watch Flow Wrestling, you realize what it took to be a great wrestler. I mean, these kids had dads. I didn't have a dad. They had dads that had connections. And I saw a coach interview last week where he literally said, if you didn't have a VHS player back then or know someone that did and have like Russian team tapes, you weren't going to be good. If your dad wasn't like a coach, you weren't going to be good. It's called politics. And I had classic Mashiach ben Yosef Jewish and exile politics. I call it Mashiach ben Yosef. It's like, Joseph ends up in Egypt and ends up next to Pharaoh. Right? I was the one who was obnoxious in homeroom and got kicked out of homeroom and ended up in the office answering phone calls every morning. And they saw, hey, this kid's actually quite articulate, quite with it. I became close friends with the principal of my school. Right? I wasn't a troublemaker. I was a ger. So basically, with Nick Talley and looking for wisdom, didn't accept the falsehoods being impressed upon me. Okay, I didn't like the secular teaching, didn't like the lack of wisdom. I lashed out, was a little bit mouthy. I mean, nothing different than today on Facebook. You guys see how I am, right? A little bit edgy, a little bit controversial. And in Centerville, Ohio in 1995, that gets you a Saturday school every once in a while, for upsetting the wrong people at the wrong time. Nothing too serious. It's just, it's not even delinquency. It's just kind of an annoyance. We'll just pass him through. He's not here to be the valedictorian. Let's put it that way. And that became my life. But the irony is that if you are the wrestler, that kid, the coach picks up that kid and says, hey, you got to stay straight and we got to get you in line because you got big dreams and ambitions. I ended up in the principal's office becoming friends with the principal. And to this day, I realized that principal, me and Nick talked about this, he got it. He got ger. That principal was definitely a ger. And he just understood. He understood Jewish kid in exile. He's smart but doesn't care. I mean, he maybe even knew about yeshivas. Who knows what a ger knows? You guys know what ger is. Ger has wisdom. It's like, where do you even know that from? But the point is, he understood who I was. He knew I wasn't the wrestler I thought I was, but I wasn't a vessel to hear that. All he knew is this kid's not a bad kid. Let him answer the phones. And they had like teacher conferences they actually invited me to because I was like an employee of the school unofficially. I mean, it was ridiculous. But that's like Joseph with Pharaoh. I mean, it's the same thing. And if you don't understand the Jew and the gay are both in your mind, you don't understand the politics that you were born into. So I'm a Jew in exile, and I'm looking to be, the non-Jew. But until I learned Ger in my own world, when I say Ger, I'm talking Nick Talley, and realizing that Nick is the one that shows up to Texas. Then you can put the pieces together and realize old Coach Simmons was retiring. You were David Katz. You are well too complicated for him to handle. He's not dealing with the Jewish mom and the kid and the thing and the thing, right? You didn't have the politics to let you succeed. It wasn't your thing. You weren't allowing yourself to be cattle prodded. But you were allowing yourself to be cattle prodded by the principal of the unit, right? You found your cattle prod. We the people, so to speak, found out that if we cattle prod David Katz with Ger wisdom, then he steps up. Then he responds. Then he answers the phones in the school, and he's a shtickle mensch. Well, we like that kid. Then it's like I go to yeshiva, and again, it's light delinquent, right? I'm not playing by the book, and I want wisdom, and I'm not settling for a second-class education, and I'm on a mission, and what it was I found myself, being reprimanded by the Rosh Yeshiva. He said, Dave, you're a freak. You're a smart kid, but you can't read. Now, reading Talmud is a skill. Many people don't realize that. You don't just walk in and can read. Reading is driving. Right? You don't just when you're reading, you can learn. That's how I know who knows how to learn Ger and not. Right? That's like the secret rabbi wisdom. If you can read the Talmud, which has no spaces and no punctuation, right? If you can read, then you know what Ger is, and I don't have to explain it to you. If you don't know what Ger is, it means you can't read. And that's just what my rabbi taught me, and that's what his rabbi taught him, and that's how it is. It's like, like fishing. You learn fishing from your dad, right? He says you're not going to catch a fish that way. Your dad was right. And Rav Weingart said you have to learn how to read. You're not going to be one of these guys that knows how to learn a page of Talmud, but you can't even make Kiddush on Friday night. You don't want to be that guy. I said, all right, deal. He says, I'll teach you how to read. Okay. He says, you got to go out and buy the Mishnah of Shabbos, 20 chapters of it. Okay, I'm done. Got it. We sat for 4 years every night learning how to read. And he knew how important it was. It was just like I had to sit there and read to the rabbi. Just read. And it was pain. It was cattle prodding pain. But look at the mazel. I ended up sitting, again, it's like detention. I'm like, can't I go out and play with my friends? Why do I have to sit with the rabbi every night? But I was mature now. I was 23, 24 years old. All right, this is what I do. I'm a prisoner in exile in Sfat, and I'm learning how to read with the rabbi. And he taught me how to read. And it was pain. But I took the cattle prodding. And that's why I am who I am today in terms of learning. Just because I learned that was my wrestling. That was my, I'm not going to leave the shoes on the mat in that arena. I'm going to the end. Now, one day I will probably die and this and that, and the shoes will be on the mat. But until that actually happens, I'm not admitting it because, I'm still in the game. But it's the same mazel. I ended up, Joseph ended up next to Pharaoh. And it became Joseph next to Pharaoh. Because I rose up in the yeshiva, became a rabbi, got students. Then it's like, oh, man, now there's a challenge and a threat in the yeshiva. But that's also futile of futilities. That's also called life. Eventually, you do have to move on. Right? You're a grown man. You're married with 2 kids. You got to just move on. This is not for you. You're not a B'ot Tshuva anymore. You're not in the beginner's Gemara class anymore. You got to go out and do something with your life. So I did. I sat in the women's section of the shul. That's where we used to learn. The women's section was only used by women in terms of the high holidays. So I sat with my friend JJ. And I said, JJ, I'm leaving. He says, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go be a light to nations. He said, what is that? I said, I don't know. I really don't know. I just feel like I want to be a light to nations. I want to give over some of this teaching, and I feel like the Vilna Gaon has a message and Kol HaTorah, and I think there's nations out there that want the truth. We talked about that for 3 hours that night. So I packed my books, left the yeshiva. My wife is saying, what are you going to do? I was saying, I'm going to be a light to nations. And she said, okay, I support you. So we bought a car. A couple of days later, I went and applied for Berlitz to teach English as a second language. In 1 week, after being in yeshiva for a decade, living in a cave in Sfat, literally for 6 years, I was teaching English in a Muslim village in the north of Israel, Foradis. I'm dressed full-clad, black and white, beard yarmulke tzitzis, and I'm in a school, an Islamic, like Dati, like frum religious school of Muslims. I mean, he was an imam with the yarmulke and the no mustache and the beard. And he's saying, David, can I get you something to eat and drink? And I'm like, wow, the Vilna Gaon was right. Yishmael likes chesed. And I'm like, I'm realizing, man, the nations are living the Torah and they don't even know it. So I started, doing notes from my classes with these kids. They were, I think, 12. How was it? One class was 9 to 11-year-olds, and the other one was like 12 to 15. And I'm realizing this is Yishmael. It's real. He exists just like the Torah says. And I used the Vilna Gaon and the methodology of Kabbalah to convey the whatever English I was teaching, but through Torah to these kids. And it worked. All of a sudden they're calling me their, like in term of endearment, teacher. I'm like, wow, this is absolutely nuts. This is when the Arab Spring started. And I actually conquered the class. I was one of them. I was yelling at them, do your wadifa. Wadifa is homework in Arabic they taught me. I'm yelling at them, just like I yell in my classes to Ger. I'm yelling at them, hey, do your wadifa. Same kind of uncultured, uncouth, kind of delinquent semi-attitude that I have, but it works. That's just all I know. I'm from, Shoshana, you understand what it is. I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm a Cohen from Pittsburgh. It's all I know. My dad owned a meat factory. So at the end of the day, things happen with my wife and health-wise, and I made a decision. Right? The Light to Nations was a little different than I would have liked to have been. But now I'm saying, you went to yeshiva and you got smicha and you claim to be a rabbi and, you did for your family what you had to do, but give the rabbi thing one more shot. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And so I did. And that's when I called Ray Pedersen of Noahide Nations. So anybody's seen the bickering and bantering with Ray Pedersen and Noahide Nations, I understand my teaching started with him. Okay, we were very close. He actually was 100% behind Ger and my research. It was awesome. We had a great relationship. In the end, there was a bit of politics that came in the middle, and it was my best interest to go and start actually this chat room that you're in right now. A guy from Australia picked up the interest, and we had Ger on our side, and we said Ray was very afraid of Ger pushback of what rabbis were going to say, but I was confident in the teachings themselves, and there were a lot of people like Ross Bearden behind it as well, and I knew who Ross was. I knew it wasn't fake. Chaim was writing the book, and I'm saying, let's do it. So we got this chat room right here. This very chat room is where it all started. And Ray was very upset that I left. But that's really when the teachings of Shem and Ger took off and blossomed, and I started to see how my life made sense. And then you have a reason to talk to Nick Talley. Then you have a reason to exist and a reason for it to make sense. And you're doing it for your kids, and the Gerim are thriving and striving and growing. And it was like fatherhood on the highest level of sensitivity with my kids, and this is where the class kind of takes a shift. When my wife died, remember, the show must go on, and I learned a very valuable lesson, and that is how to grieve. And I didn't know that was the skill I was learning. as it went on for a couple of years, the interactions with people, I started to see that I had a skill of how to grieve. I really like grieving. I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie American Beauty, type 1 or 2, if you ever saw the movie American Beauty. You know the song at the end of the movie? The extremely depressing song at the end of the movie? I had that song on my Windows media player 24/6 for 3 months straight. So if anyone that knew me then in my name work, mazel work, or teaching, that was where I was. That was the song playing 24/6, nonstop. The most depressing song of all time. Thinking about the most depressing things of all time. And I realized, go into the wound. Go into that wound. I just kind of knew like a dog knows how to nurse the puppies just from instinct. So I was like a mother at that time. I became a mother. I mean, I was raising the kids in diapers. It is what it is. It's, God gives you the mentality you need to get through fantastic times. And so I got that mentality. And I explored the wound. I let the soul speak through the wound. And it does happen that way. When someone dies, I'll tell you what, you speak to them through the wound. Because you can hear them loud and clear. And by that time, you can understand how I was able to let go of wrestling. Wrestling now is just a fantasy fairy tale. I understand that there was no finger pointing and there was no blame. There was no evil coach that sat at, who sought out to kill me or, keep me down and keep my dreams from me. It's called life. It was the Satan, The Satan said, you see a wrestling coach, but I see a wrestling coach in transition going into retirement. And your bad luck, David Katz, was you moved to the wrong school at the wrong time with the wrong family, and you couldn't have controlled that. Your mom didn't control it. Your coach didn't control it. It was God putting you on your journey. So what you felt an attachment to in your youth, that was just the plight and experiences of youth. King David calls it post-traumatic stress disorder for the first 40 years of your life. And that's what you have to get over. Once you turn 40, get towards 40, Bina understanding comes in. You can begin to understand your life in context of your post-traumatic stress disorder, a.k.a. your Job program running in your life, because you are Job.
Really? Would that include me, Rabbi?
I think so. Everybody.
You think?
Yeah. Everybody has their Job moment.
I'm going to be 48 in December. Am I not?
You've got 8 years of Bina in you. I told you that many times.
I know. We've gone over this. We've gone over this over and over. And we've been listening to you for such a long time on such an incredibly good path. So I'm curious because we're coming up within 15 minutes where I'm actually going to have to talk. Now look, you put me on the Bima, so I am going to be there. Hello, everyone. This is Shoshana. So what is your wrap up? What is your really good? You've talked some really good stuff about the wrestling, the mentality, how you get there, what your eyes are on, what the confrontational issues would be, Facebook, reality, etc. How would you wrap this up for them in a sort of Gerto Shop way, in how they can wake up tomorrow morning and embrace the dawn and align themselves with Hashem and carry on? That is my question.
Perfect question. This is where Gear Shampoo comes in. Before tonight's class, I gave that exact thing over to Gear Shampoo. And I just got it. I was talking to Ross on Facebook, and Ross just made one of his classic Ross wisdom comments, one word. And it came down. I knew I had to tell Gear Shampoo because he and I worked on this all day, and so did Shoshana and I. And that was, I was dating someone before Texas and during Texas, through emails and when I came home. And I thought I was going to marry this woman. I'm kind of a helpless romantic. I actually believe everything I do is going to be successful, which is the whole wrestling dilemma. It's like, hey, you like me, I like you, we should get married, right? And there was a good thought about it, I think. And terms of where I was looking at it from.
I'm going to interrupt you really quick and let the listening audience understand that I am not a romantic. So this is really the rabbi song.
And I think this is the Song of Songs. I wrote that in my notes. I think this is what Shlomo Melech is getting at in Song of Songs. And what it is this. What I liked about this woman is that she had a crazier mazel story than I did. You know, she was in her early 40s and a widow who inherited some other guy's, a guy married a girl. They had 5 kids. He was Moroccan. She was Ashkenazi. She died. Therefore, he has 5 kids. He marries an Ashkenazi girl. They have a daughter, which makes it 6 kids, and then he dies. And she has his 5 kids and her daughter. And she says, hey, you know, David Katz, you have a crazy mazel story in your profile. Want to hear mine? And me, like an idiot, says, hey, yeah, tell me. And we go out for a couple months, and we really liked each other. I mean, it was a soulmate. It was a complete soulmate. The bottom line is, and this is where the real focus is for what we're doing here, she was a liar. And when I say liar, I'm just speaking from dramatic point of view and for shock value. You might even call the word denial. That's really what it was. But again, it's in terms of dating, it's like you have to be a bit fierce and making calculated decisions because you don't want to end up in a bad relationship. And you judge things a little bit brutal when it comes to that. And look, Ger's judged brutally also. I mean, no one's asking if Rabbi Katz is a nice guy, bad guy. What we're saying is he lying in the sources or is he not? I mean, that's just kind of how it's viewed. To say that's kind of life. So she denied that she needed to grieve. She was denying her personal grief and selling me on a story of I'm okay, I'm over it, and I got to move on, and I'm ready. Just like with Ger. Maybe Rabbi Katz is a nice guy, but it's like, yeah, Ger's good. No, maybe Rabbi Katz just learned it wrong, and he's a Nebuch kind of guy, and God bless his heart, and he's just misdirected, and he's guiding a lot of people wrong. But I'm not going to fall victim because of him. Or maybe he's right. I don't know. But the bottom line is, you know, this is people's processes. This is Klippus Amalek. It's doubt entering the mind, and you just got to address it in kind of a gruff, kind of inner monologue lingo, because the ramification is you're going to end up married to somebody. Man, you don't want to go through this again. You really don't want to grieve again. So you got to use a bit of rough language in your own mind. In the end, we shared a lot of personal things. We were very close to making this thing go. I mean, it was Shoshana knows. It was really close. We had one last date. It was either going to work or it wasn't going to work. We kind of knew that. We were at an impasse. It's like he's either moving in with his kids or we're separating the issue. I mean, it was that close. And she told me afterwards she was already thinking about building an extension on her house. I mean, this was really, really, really going. In the end, I meditated on the whole ride in the car to Tiberias where I was going to meet her. And I came to the conclusion, Rabbi Katz has to show up on this date and not Nebuch David Katz. Rabbi Katz has to show up, and Rabbi Katz has to hear her out. Rabbi Katz has to be an ear open to hear the Torah from her soul, because David Katz can't afford to be heard again. And I went, and what I heard was all about death, grieving. And I'm like, hey, you know, God has spoken. I don't need to put any words in her mouth, and I'm not talking death, grieve. I've already been there. I've already served my time. I've already let go and moved on, and I'm ready to build a life. She was just entering her grieving stage. And when I came home and discussing it with my friends and mother and support team, I'm saying, how could it be that she's not grieving and telling me she's ready to go to a marriage? And you know, how do you fool yourself like that? And the answer was very simple. And this is the biggest revelation currently of my life. So pay attention. And I think this is the secret of Song of Songs. Her mind and her soul have moved on. They've accepted life. They've embraced the tragedies, and they've moved on, and she's ready to get married. But her body is a physical animal, just like all of our bodies are. and it suffered impact and trauma, right? It got hit. It was abused by the pain. And you can't undo your body, right? You can't say your body doesn't feel pain, because it does. It's built that way. And she wasn't acknowledging, you might not, if the endorphins were running, she didn't know her body hurt so bad. And I learned that lesson. When you acknowledge the wound, you'll realize, man, you feel pain, and it's not a blemish. It's not a weakness that you feel pain. It's a blessing. It's a blessing to feel the pain and allow the pain and work with the pain. She was denying the pain. And I'm saying, my message to her, since I'm a mother in transition in a weird kind of way, and we talked, and she got the message. My message to her is my same message to you and the GARE world. You need to experience the pain, because the pain is real, and that pain is on the body, and it's undeniable. It's physical pain. It's trauma. We all want to move on. We all want the truth. We want to be GARE, lost Jews, tribesmen, all these things. Unfortunately, religion is a relationship. It's a relationship, and it's pain when it's over. Like, you can call it Jesus, you can call it idolatry, you can call it St. Menachem's Church, you can call it the yeshiva, whatever you want to call your idolatry. You can call it, I'm addicted to guy's name Bill. Whatever it is your thing, okay? Alcoholism, drugs, gambling, wrestling mats and shoes, whatever your thing is. Whatever it is. You are in a relationship, in a committed relationship. And I was committed to the wrestler David Katz. And he died on me. He broke his arm. And I felt the pain. My arm hurt. I dislocated my elbow. But I think that my anticipation and expectation of the GARE movement, and this is what I told GARE Shampoo, and I'm going to close on this note. I'm asking myself, why aren't people getting GARE? I mean, everybody's asking that question. What's so hard? I mean, come on, man. It's just 7 laws of Noah in the Bible is called GARE. What's the problem? What is the problem? 7 laws of Noah in the Bible is called GARE. Hello. And their minds are with you, and their souls are with you, and their emotions are with you. Rabbi Katz, yes, you're right. You learned it right. Woohoo! Go, Rabbi Katz, go. Rabbi Katz had to learn a valuable lesson. And that's called the body is in trauma. We are letting go of our old lovers and relationships, and it's a death. It's a death. I had to let go of, the Rashi Goy who was, imprisoning the Jew, and Jews have to let go of that. It's a relationship. Okay, it's a dysfunctional relationship in an abusive one. Okay, we know it's an abusive relationship. That's the point. Your husband dying on you is not a positive thing. My wife dying on me was not a positive thing. I say, hey, lucky me. Everybody has life happen to them. And of course you want to move on, put your chin up and say, oh, no, I'm not hurt, not me. You're right. You don't feel the pain because your endorphins are going and you're being Superman. But if you'll calm down and allow the acknowledgement of that gashing or whatever wound you have and blood flowing, you'll realize your body's in trauma. And I realized this is where we're at in the movement. This is where Noahides are. It's where GARE is. It's where the falling church is. It's where the falling Islamic world is in their Arab Spring. It's where the corruption in rabbi is in Judaism and Democrats and Republicans is, right?
Okay, Rabbi. We know that there are all of those different movements out there, and we know that also we're winding down because it's 3:24 Eastern Standard Time here, and we're going to have Ross Bearden come in, and you're going to stay. It looks like Lars is, he's going to get some sleep. Some other people are going to stay. So we have a wrap up here for 5 minutes. And what would that be, do you think, from everything that you have gleaned from, the Chagim? Really, the Chagim.
I think the gleaming is a reality check. Where are we at as a people, as mankind? The answer is, and that we're having it put upon us no matter what. It's that I think we're looking for the soul work and the mind work and the emotional work. I think we have to acknowledge the physical trauma of mankind. There's a huge physical trauma going on, and that's what needs healed. The concept is not the problem of getting. The concept that I had to get tonight in the holidays of giving is that the appreciation of the need of time and separation and process to acknowledge the trauma, embrace the trauma, not be embarrassed of the trauma, and help people recognize and heal from the traumas of life. It's Job. Job, in the end, healed his trauma, and God came to him in the vision. And that's where we're at. And I'm going to close on that note. The problem is not you per se, the proverbial you. The problem is the body. The body's in trauma. And the best thing we can do is help facilitate and understand people's physical traumas that they are unaware of, because that's where life has brought us. You know, I think the 20th century is, the life is that. That's mankind. And I'll close on that note.